Story number 1. I was hiking in the Olympic National Forest a few years ago. Just me and my 2 dogs. We were 4 days into the trip, at least 20 miles in, as the crow flies, from even a known mountain road. That night, I was camping at around 7,000 feet, right where the tree line starts to thin out. The campsite was a big, open meadow on top of a secondary mountain, and we arrived there about an hour before sunset. My big dog usually runs around near camp while I set up the tent and make dinner. But this time felt different. He kept staring up the steep, tree-covered mountainside, tail straight up and barking. And it wasn't his usual bark. Not the excited, I see a marmot kind of bark. It was high-pitched, unsure, almost concerned. The day before, I'd found a note under a rock at the last landmark. It said there'd been a problem bear in the area, one that had been harassing a group of campers just a few days ago. I'd also seen big cat tracks that same day. So yeah, I was rightfully concerned. This felt like more than just ground squirrels. I decided to climb some of the boulders at the base of the hill to get a better look before heading up to hang my bear bag. Those were the only nearby trees tall enough to hang it from. I didn't see or hear anything, but my dog came over, quietly whining. He knew something was up there. Still concerned, I started making my way up the steep hill to hang the bag. It was so steep I had to use the trees to balance myself. I'd lean on one tree, then push forward 5 or 6 steps to the next one, just to keep from tumbling backward. I kept slowly working my way up, hopping from tree to tree for support. Then, about 100 feet up, I heard something big, moving roughly 50 feet ahead of me. My dog instantly went from a low, deep growl to a savage, slobber flying everywhere kind of bark. My heart was pounding out of my chest. I started to panic. A million thoughts raced through my head. If it was a bear, my dog was going to try and protect me, and he'd probably die doing it. If I had to get down the hill quickly, I'd almost definitely trip and fall. There was a 12 to 15-foot cliff behind me, leading straight down to hundreds of jagged boulders, some as big as 20 feet across. I felt completely screwed. Then I heard my little dog barking too, freaking out down in the campsite. I had her zipped up in the tent so she wouldn't wander off, but now she was going wild. That's when the full panic set in. A few seconds later, I managed to snap out of it. I forced myself to focus on survival, what needed to happen next. I called my big dog back to me. He came and sat right against my feet while I leaned back against a tree. I was kind of pinned in place, but he seemed to be trying to separate me from whatever was up there. I let him lean into me while I tried to calm down. That's when I realized I had forgotten my headlamp. I reached up fast to turn it on and ended up basically punching myself in the face. My adrenaline was so high my knees were shaking. I finally got the lamp on and shined it up the hill. I figured I'd catch a glimpse, eyes reflecting back at me, some kind of movement, anything. But there was nothing. Still, I knew something was there. We both heard it. And whatever it was, it hadn't run far. At this point, I was just frozen. I needed to know what was up there. I had to sleep here tonight. Alone. In the middle of nowhere. Better to face it now than lie in the tent all night like a sitting duck. That was my logic. As I stared up the hill, trying to make something out, my dog suddenly lunged forward, knocking me off balance and unpinning me from the tree. He did a fake charge, more like a bluff, up the hill maybe 15 feet or so. And I mean, he was snarling, foaming at the mouth. Completely feral. That's when I finally saw it, movement. Something shifted. Just enough to break the line of the horizon and the glow of the sunset. My dog's bluff had flushed it out. Whatever it was, it had blown its cover. My eyes locked in. I called my dog back and stayed still, watching in silence. What I made out next stopped my heart cold. There was a man crouched about 75 feet directly in front of me. He wasn't wearing camouflage exactly, but ragged clothes. Stuff that looked like it hadn't been washed in years. The hood blended in perfectly with the landscape, like a makeshift ghillie suit. But his face was completely exposed. I couldn't make out his eyes, but I could tell they were locked onto mine. His skin looked dirty, like it was smeared with mud or soot. Whatever it was, he looked feral, and we just stared at each other. No words, no sound, just this long, eerie silence. It felt like minutes passed, me standing there, trying to convey with just my eyes that I wasn't going to back down, that I saw him. But inside, I was shaking. Back at the campsite, my little dog started barking again, loud and frantic. That scared kind of barking. the kind that makes your skin crawl. I realized I had to get off that hill now. If it got dark while I was still up there, I could seriously hurt myself, or worse, trying to get back down. So I started moving. Slowly, carefully. My dog didn't want to leave, but he listened. He stayed close as I made my way down. Every few steps I stopped, put my back against a tree, looked back up toward where I saw the man. Just to make it even clearer, I saw you. I know you're there. Eventually, I made it down to the boulders at the bottom of the hill. And when I jumped the last ledge and landed, I realized my little dog had finally stopped barking. From where I stood among the rocks, I could just barely see the top of my tent. I figured maybe she was just barking at the other dog, or just barking to bark. Dachshunds tend to do that. But when I got back to camp, my little dog wasn't in the tent. Somehow she had gotten out. The zipper was still shut, but she was out and pacing the campsite. She was growling, low and steady, tail sticking straight out, ears up, the tiniest little body trying her best to hold it together. Like she knew we weren't alone out there. I tried to convince myself maybe she just got her nose between the zippers and worked her way out of the tent. But I was positive I had zipped it all the way. The zipper tab and the opening were at the very top of the tent door, completely out of her reach. I stood there, caught somewhere between terrified, pissed off, and desperate to do something. So I reached into my day pack and pulled out my .40. I fired a single shot into the air as the sun dipped below the mountains. Then I climbed into my tent without even bothering to eat. I lay there the entire night, gun in hand, my back to the wall of the tent, waiting for first light. As soon as the sun rose, I started packing my gear. I was done. No more second guessing. I was getting off that mountain. The trail back was all downhill, which should have made things easier, but it didn't. Even pushing hard, I couldn't make it back to my car before dark. The terrain was brutal and I was constantly looking over my shoulder. By the time I reached the last campsite, about 4 miles from the trailhead, the sun had already set. But luckily, there were other people there. They had a fire going, and the second I saw them, I felt a flood of relief. Safe. At least for the night. We sat around the fire and they asked where I'd come from. I told them everything, every chilling detail about the man in the woods, the dogs, the tent. They were wide-eyed by the time I finished. They told me they were planning to hike into that same area the next morning. After hearing my story? Yeah. No. We both agreed we were walking back to our cars at first light. No way we were sticking around. But here's the part that still haunts me to this day. When I finally got home, I looked up reviews of that same hike, just out of curiosity. And I wasn't the only one. Other people had reported similar experiences. Strange noises, feelings of being watched, unexplained movements in the trees. One man was even found dead from a fall in the same boulder range 2 years ago. And a woman, she was found murdered just last year, not far from where I camped. I don't think I'll ever go back. Sherwood turned out to be just the delivery guy for the night. He wasn't joining us. But the moment he arrived at the apartment, there was this weird, awkward energy about him. He was clearly nervous, fumbling with the pizza boxes, avoiding eye contact. My friend introduced us quickly, and the way she spoke to him, overly thankful, almost too polite, made it obvious that Sherwood did a lot more for her than just deliver food. After handing over the pizza, there was a brief moment of small talk. Forced, uncomfortable small talk. My friend stayed kind and upbeat despite how awkward it was. Sherwood wasn't a great conversationalist. He seemed really out of place, like he didn't quite know how to exist in that room. Then, out of nowhere, Sherwood asked for my number. I was in a tough spot. Our mutual friend was sitting right there, watching the whole thing unfold. I didn't want to be rude or make it weird. So, I gave it to him. Yeah. We chatted for maybe 5 minutes, and then my friend finally gave him a cue to leave, something like, "Thanks so much for dropping this off." He seemed to pick up on it. We both gave him a quick, awkward hug. Then she added, "Well, drive safe," another clear hint. After he left, I asked her what that was all about. She explained that Sherwood was sort of her unpaid personal assistant. He did her grocery shopping, picked up food, random errands, pretty much anything she needed. I think Sherwood was just really lonely, desperate for interaction, especially from women. We were both young and immature at the time, maybe 23, but even then, I think we both sensed that something was seriously off about Sherwood. It was hard to explain. He wasn't overtly creepy, but there was something we couldn't quite put our finger on. After that, Sherwood started a group chat with the two of us. Just casual stuff. A meme here and there every week. It felt like he was trying to stay relevant, like he wanted to be remembered without being annoying. Maybe he'd been blocked or ghosted by other women before. I don't know. But it felt like he was walking this careful tightrope trying to stay on my radar without giving me a reason to cut him off. He even started offering to help me with errands. The first time I just said, thanks for asking, but no. But he kept asking. Every single weekend after that. One day, I made the mistake of actually accepting his help. I knew better. I really did. But I had just found a great deal on Craigslist for a new washing machine, and I had no idea how I was going to pick it up and install it by myself. I casually mentioned the situation in the group chat, and Sherwood immediately jumped at the opportunity. He excitedly volunteered to take care of the whole thing. And to his credit, he did. He handled the pickup and installation like a total champ. It saved me a ton of hassle and stress. I tried to pay him for his time and effort, I really did. I wanted to show appreciation. But he flat out refused to take any money. I insisted. Eventually, he offered a different idea. He said I could repay him by going on a hike with him. Yeah, a hike. It threw me off. I mean, the way he said it, it didn't sound romantic. He made it sound like a fair trade. Just a casual outing to balance the favor he'd done for me. But still, it made me uneasy. Felt too personal. Like it could be mistaken for a date, even if he didn't say it was one. But then I started rationalizing it. I told myself it was just repayment. A one-time thing. And honestly, I didn't think Sherwood had many friends. Maybe it was just a way for him to enjoy some companionship for a couple hours. So, I agreed. I figured, if anything, I was doing something nice for someone who didn't have a lot of people in his life. Still, part of me couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I wasn't exactly excited to spend time with him in such an isolated setting. The day of the hike, Sherwood picked a trail nearby. I'd been there before. It was gorgeous. Familiar. I figured that was a good sign. As we walked along the path, he chatted about totally ordinary things, work, the weather, his hobbies. It was almost normal. But then, he suggested we leave the main trail. He said he wanted to show me something special. Something off the path. I hesitated. I asked him what it was, but he just smiled and said it would be worth it. Reluctantly, I followed. We reached this secluded little clearing. No one around. Trees pressing in on all sides. And that's when I saw it. A dead body. I'm not exaggerating. There was an actual corpse. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might explode in my chest. And Sherwood? He just stood there. Calm. Still. Almost proud. Like it was something he wanted me to see. The casualness in his demeanor made everything feel so much worse. It wasn't just that he was showing me a dead body. It was how he was showing it to me, like he wasn't horrified or even curious. Just calm. Like this was something normal for him. That made my skin crawl. The smell was bad, but not like what you'd expect from a movie. It wasn't fresh. And it wasn't overpowering. I'm no biologist, but my guess? It had probably smelled a lot worse before. By now, maybe it was already well into the later stages of decay. I couldn't even process what I was seeing. My mind was stuck somewhere between shock and denial. And somehow Sherwood just stood there silent, staring. I mumbled something in excuse. I said I needed to head back soon. Something about checking in with someone or having somewhere to be. Then I turned and started walking quickly back toward the main trail. I urged Sherwood to follow me, and to my relief he did. But every step felt like walking on glass. I didn't know what was going on in his head. I didn't know what this meant. Maybe this was his way of showing me that he wasn't just some awkward little guy running errands for girls who didn't take him seriously. Maybe it was a power move, something to intimidate me. Like he was saying, I'm familiar with things like this. I'm not someone you forget. Or maybe that was the whole point. Sometimes when I talk to people, I get the sense that they only notice me when I'm in front of them. And when I'm gone, I'm forgotten. Maybe Sherwood felt that way too. And maybe somehow he thought this would make sure I never forgot him again. Whatever his reasoning was, I didn't want to be anywhere near him anymore. As we walked back together, I was in full fight or flight mode. My eyes kept scanning the path, searching for other hikers, rangers, anyone who could make me feel like I wasn't alone with him anymore. And then finally, I saw someone. A man was hiking toward us, a few yards ahead. I didn't even hesitate. I called out to him. Not to expose Sherwood, not yet. I just asked him for directions. Loudly. It was my way of letting Sherwood know I wasn't afraid to talk to someone else. I wasn't subtle. I kept the man engaged, pretending to be confused about where the trailhead was. Asking him to clarify, asking again. Eventually, I just said, "Would you mind walking us there?" And thankfully, he agreed. It was like finding a lifeline. I clung to it. Getting that stranger to walk us back was my way of reattaching myself to reality, to safety, while I was still reeling from what Sherwood had shown me. We reached the parking area together. As soon as I had enough distance from Sherwood, I called my friend. And I told her plainly that I had just been out on a hike with Sherwood. I suggested Sherwood could drop me off at my friend's place. Told him we'd be there in 20 minutes. He agreed right away. That was my way of creating a record, making sure someone else knew I was with him. If anything happened, it would be on file that Sherwood was the last person to see me. I didn't stop there. I immediately texted my friend about what had happened. I needed it in writing, something concrete in case things went south. When we pulled up to her apartment, we both gave him a polite thank you, then made it clear he wasn't staying. I had already told her the basics through text, but once I got inside, I started giving her all the details. The body had insects crawling on it. The face was decomposing, but still recognizable. Her reaction was pure terror, not just because of the body, but because of how casual Sherwood had been. Like it wasn't even that big of a deal to him. She admitted something then, something I think we both already knew deep down. She had always felt like something was off about him. Even if she couldn't put her finger on it before, she felt it. Neither of us had imagined anything this disturbing. We agreed right then and there, Sherwood had to be removed from our lives. But it wasn't going to be easy. She felt stuck, dependent. She'd leaned on him too much for too long to just cut ties overnight. So we made a plan. It was going to be gradual. We'd stop interacting with him alone, only when other people were around. We'd slowly stop replying to his texts. I would never ask for help again. And my friend would ease off little by little. Sherwood kept texting on weekends, offering help, errands, asking if we needed anything. And my friend would just reply with lines like, "I'm trying to be more independent these days, but you've been such a good help." Eventually, she started dating someone new. She introduced Sherwood to her boyfriend. And just like that, Sherwood never contacted her again. I called the police that same night, reported what I saw on the hike. But it took a while before we heard anything else. At least a month passed before a news story came out. Authorities had discovered a dead body in that same area where Sherwood had taken me. They arrested someone. But it wasn't Sherwood. It was a man Sherwood followed on Instagram. To this day, I have no idea if Sherwood was connected to the murder or if he just knew about it and said nothing. I've replayed that day over and over again in my head, wondering if I missed something, if I should have done more. But in the end, I think there's one clear takeaway. Trust your instincts. No matter how polite someone seems. No matter how helpful they are. No matter how hard it is to explain why something feels off. If your gut tells you something's wrong, listen to it. Because that instinct, it might be the only thing keeping you alive. Story number 2. It was almost 20 years ago that this happened. It's an old story now, and I'm pretty sure no one is in any imminent danger. My family owns some property that backs up to Carson National Forest in New Mexico. It's been in our family for generations, and my sister and I used to spend our summers up there. The place is gorgeous, lush and green with cool mountain air in the summer. It was always a relief to get away from the dusty ranch and escape into the mountains. Our dad was ex-military, and having 2 daughters, let's just say he made sure we were well prepared for the outdoors. He taught us survival skills, how to defend ourselves, and everything from hunting and fishing to camping and hiking. To us, it was all just fun. But I guess he wanted to make sure we could take care of ourselves. We'd spend several weeks each summer hiking with him, exploring the old mining communities and checking out the historic Big Ditch project that was built for the Red River back in the late 1800s. At least, I think that's when it was. Either way, it's a fantastic place to hike. There are beautiful high mountain lakes, streams, and lots of wildlife. You get the idea. This particular story happened when I was in college and my younger sister was still in high school. Our dad was still working back home, so he'd come up every few weeks to spend time with us. In the meantime, we stayed there with our mom, who mostly spent time in town or around the property painting. My sister and I passed our time hiking, exploring jeep trails, and sleeping under the stars. It was late June or maybe early July when we decided to hike up to Lost Lake. That's one of my favorite lakes in the whole area. If you look at it from the right angle, the shape of it actually looks like a heart. We set out that morning fully prepared. Each of us had a small hammock in our packs to set up when we reached the lake. We just wanted to relax and enjoy the view for a while. I'll admit it, I'm a bit of an outdoor type. I swear that when it's quiet enough, you can actually hear the trees talk. Of course, we both always carried knives when we hiked. Our dad insisted, not just for protection but also in case of accidents or unexpected needs. The hike was going well. Our summer cabin sits pretty far up the valley, so we just set out on foot toward the trailhead. To get to Lost Lake, you first follow the trail that leads to Middle Fork Lake. Then you branch off onto another path that takes you up to Lost Lake. We passed a few hikers on the way, but they were all heading to Middle Fork. That was good news for us. It meant we might have Lost Lake all to ourselves. It's a solid hike with some long, winding switchbacks at the end, but it's totally worth it. The lake is stunning, this beautiful, deep emerald green color. Well, we got there, and sure enough, we had the lake all to ourselves. We hiked around the lake for a while, then decided to head back a bit to find a good spot to set up our hammocks. As we walked into the tree line, my sister suddenly stopped and asked, "Do you smell that?" Yeah, I did. It was the unmistakable smell of a dead animal mixed with a strong scent of blood. We'd both done a lot of hunting and knew that smell well. That's when I saw it, a deer carcass lying there. But what was around it was what really disgusted me. Placed carefully around the deer, in a perfect circle, were its organs and entrails. But it wasn't just some messy cleanup. The organs were arranged with small piles of rocks between each piece, like some sort of ritual. I've seen hunters get gross and messy with their kills before, and some guys have tried to gross me out on purpose. But this was different. This wasn't just cleaning up. It felt deliberate, like the arrangement meant something. I stepped back from the strange circle, and that's when my sister started to say my name. But then she stopped, because we saw him, the man who had done this. He looked like he'd just climbed out of the deer's body. He was covered in blood, barely clothed, maybe even naked, though honestly I didn't want to look too closely. He stood near a cluster of trees, about 20 feet from us. I thought maybe he was trying to hide, but not very well. My dad always told us that if we ever found ourselves in a situation where we didn't feel in control, we had to do everything in our power to take control. Do something that would surprise the other person. Don't do what they expect. That advice was racing through my head, and I could tell my sister was about to freak out. So I stepped up and said, "Hey, pretty good kill you got there. Did you use a bow?" The guy just stood there, his eyes wide and crazy like he was stoned out of his mind on some other planet. So I'm thinking, great. We just ran into this guy who'd lost it blood crazy with his deer. He was staring me down and I was staring right back while my sister was getting ready to run. I don't know what came over me, but I put my hand on the knife I always kept at my waist, just to show him I wasn't completely helpless. I don't know why I did it, but something told me to make sure he knew I wasn't going to back down or be afraid. I kept eye contact with him. I guess he was maybe in his early 30s, but I'm bad at guessing ages. He looked pretty dirty though. You could tell even under all that blood. I started to back off slowly and my sister moved behind me. I spoke again, "So you had a great hunting day." The crazy man didn't say a word. He just stood there like a statue, or maybe like he thought if he didn't move or make a sound, I wouldn't see him. We moved back toward the lakeside and then booked it around the lake. My sister stayed ahead of me, shaking badly. At first, I was mostly pissed off. If he wanted to get all crazy in the woods with his deer, he should have gone way further back. We made it back to the trailhead, stopped to catch our breath, and looked at each other. I scanned the tree line, making sure we weren't being followed. My sister was just in shock. We started down the trail pretty fast. I was hoping to keep my sister together until we could reach the Middle Fork Lake Trail or maybe run into some other hikers. But the odds weren't good on this trail. You have to get an early start to do the Lost Lake Trail, and by now it was late morning or noon. We were making good time and hadn't even talked about what we saw. Just focused on hiking back down. Then I started getting that feeling like I wasn't alone. I kept looking back, but I didn't see or hear anything at first. My sister refused to look back. She just kept moving forward. But I felt like I had to keep checking just to make sure that idiot wasn't following us. That's when the first stuff came flying at us. Small pebbles. It really pissed me off because it was obvious someone was throwing them and it could only have been him. My sister was almost running at this point, but I'm a mouthy smart aleck. I blame the Texas upbringing. And dang it, this was my forest. I grew up here. These were my legs, my trails. I wasn't about to let some crazy dude ruin it for me. I started yelling back, telling him to go back to his deer and leave us alone. At this point, my sister was telling me to shut up and just come on. But I was thinking, no way. This guy's just trying to scare us. The pebbles stopped. Then we started hearing barking and growling noises. My sister said, now he's growling at us. I told her to get down on the trail and ignore it. He was behind us pretty much the whole way, growling and making these barking noises every once in a while. But I never caught a glimpse of him. Once we got close to where the trail joined the Middle Fork Trail, he seemed to back off. I never saw him behind us, but I could hear him. I just knew he was there. We started down the rest of the trail. My sister refused to stop or look behind her, so I kept checking every so often. I didn't see or hear anything. We started to talk about what had happened. She felt like he was very sinister, that we'd been in a dangerous situation. I felt like he was just getting his kicks out of scaring two girls. I mean, he had to have heard us coming around the lake. We weren't being quiet. Actually, it was the opposite. There are black bears up there, so we'd always be pretty loud while hiking to scare off any bears. To this day, she still thinks he was sinister. And I think he was just trying to scare two girls and was getting his kicks out of it. We told our parents what happened. My dad didn't like what he heard. He taught us some more up-close defense skills after that day. He forbade us from ever hiking alone or just the two of us again. We didn't hike the trail for several years with anyone. It really freaked out my sister. And I just didn't like remembering a time when I was scared in the forest I considered my own. I didn't know it at the time, but after we got back to the house and told my mom, she called some neighbors. A few of the men hiked up there the next day to check things out. They found the deer carcass and some empty hiking packs like the kind day hikers use. But the packs were empty. They also found a rustic campsite further back in the woods that had been cleared out as well. A little background about me: I'm a woman in my late 20s and this happened fairly recently. Nothing bad happened to me, but I'm really lucky it didn't, and it easily could have. There's a conservation area I used to like to walk in regularly. It's right beside a golf course near an ordinary subdivision just off a busy road. It's pretty popular with dog walkers and photographers. The conservation area is well maintained and has signs alerting users that there are hidden cameras everywhere. My point in mentioning all this is to say that, by all accounts, this is a very safe, vanilla urban wooded area in a populated neighborhood. One big thing about me is that I really like isolation to recharge. I dislike crowded trails. So I usually go off-peak during unpleasant weather, not dangerous weather. For example, when it's too cold, lightly raining, or foggy. I stay safe, but I like there to be as few people around as possible. In a city during daylight, I don't feel like I'm taking any risks by doing this. The first encounter happened on a day I went around 4 p.m. It was a frigid, rainy Monday in November. On days like that, there's maybe only 1 or 2 dog walkers. But that day, there was no car in the parking lot, except for a dirty blue pickup truck with a man sitting inside. I noticed he was looking at me, but that didn't bother me. I was just happy to see the trail was empty. On that particular day, I went to practice my navigation skills. I was learning how to use a compass at the time. It's good to practice that skill in an area where you won't get lost. I decided to go off-trail to a big pine plantation. It's a large open area with mature pine trees. If you're not familiar, it's not really a hiking spot or interesting in any way. Definitely off-trail. You wouldn't get there unless you really wanted to. I picked my first landmark, sighted it using my compass, and started pacing toward it. About halfway there, I heard rustling through the bushes. I turned around and saw the man from the dirty blue pickup truck entering the pine plantation. He was a mid-50s white man, a little pudgy, wearing a baggy beige cardigan and blue slacks. I felt alert at this point. He felt out of place somehow. I took note but pretended to keep walking with my compass, not wanting to seem weird. I glanced at him. He pretended to ignore me, but I got a really bad gut feeling. I felt like he was following me. I have an anxiety disorder, so I tried not to freak out for no reason. I didn't want to ruin my relaxation time. After all, it was just a guy walking around. No big deal. To test if he was following me, I pivoted 180 degrees and walked directly toward the trail again. He was still following me. I walked through the bushes onto the trail, and he followed. By then, I was freaked out. The pine plantation entrance is only about 50 feet from the trail. If he was really there just to walk around, why did he follow me this far? Bad signs. Yeah, he was definitely following me. I quickly left the trail, and when I reached the parking lot, I saw he was still watching me. I took the long way home. That experience freaked me out. After that, I only visited the area once before the second encounter. Now, onto the second encounter. This time, I wanted to go bird watching. A week earlier, I had seen an owl in the same pine plantation. I wanted to see it again. I was practicing navigation again. I had seen the owl about an hour before sundown, so I thought that was a good time to try again. When I checked the parking lot, the blue pickup truck wasn't there. But there were two other cars with men nearby. One was a red sedan with heavily tinted windows. The other looked empty. So I went on the trail again. The day was muddy, wet, and cold. The area should have been totally empty. Good. Unfortunately, not so. About 20 feet down the trail, I heard footsteps behind me. I don't like when people walk behind me, but it's not a crime. I figured I'd lose them soon once I got to the pine plantation. I'm sure you know where this is going. When I walked into the pine plantation, I heard the same rustling in the bushes as before. I turned around and there he was. The same man from before. A wave of terror and dread washed over me. Alone in a muddy forest with a possible stalker. But somehow everything felt calm and mundane at the same time. To confirm my fears, I walked over to the spot where I had seen the owl just last week. I paused to look for it. And who do I see next to me? The same freaking guy from before. At this point, I was terrified. Every part of me screamed, "Run!" I started walking as fast as I could back toward the trail. Along the way, I passed a random man in the pine plantation. I smiled at him, totally on autopilot. He smiled back. It wasn't until I got to the parking lot that I really freaked out. There was a second person in the pine plantation. Could they have been connected? I stopped briefly in the parking lot and took out a small notepad. I quickly wrote down the license plates of the two cars. That's when the original man caught up to me. I started booking it on foot out of the parking lot. He yelled, "Hey, can I give you a ride?" I just shook my head and kept walking. As I walked away, he began following me in his car. He waited at the intersection to see which way I'd go. I decided to walk to a busy park to lose him. He pulled into a nearby hidden driveway and just stared at me. Then he took out his phone, presumably to take a photo. He noted the direction I was walking and then did a U-turn, driving fast the other way. In conclusion, I took the long way home, filled out a police report, and the police opened an investigation. I have not gone back to the conservation area since. This experience has left me with an ongoing nervousness about being alone, especially because I don't know who the second guy was. I passed him so quickly. All I know is he was mid-50s, bald, and wore glasses. The police told me there's not much they can do at this point. So the best I can do is stay vigilant and try not to let it freak me out too much. Unfortunately, this has totally ruined my love for going out into the wilderness alone. Nothing bad happened, but I think that's only because I was able to escape and lose him before anything did. Story number 3. This is truly the scariest, most horrible thing that has ever happened to me. I've never been so petrified in my life. To this day, I still don't know who that man was, what he was trying to do, or if he's still out there where I saw him. I'm sorry for the long geographical description, but I want everyone to understand how secluded I was when this happened and how badly it could have ended if it wasn't for my parents. I was back home for the summer for the first time in a year after starting university. Our home was, and still is, just outside a small town surrounded by forests. Nearby, there was a small man-made lake, which diverged from a river that ran for miles through the forest. The river split into a few streams east of the lake. Near my home, there was a small grassy path that led to the river, following one of those streams. It was a long walk, but one I used to take often as a child. I knew the forest well. I knew exactly where I could cut through the dense trees to reach the stream. The walk I would take always led me off the path, which slowly turned northwest, away from the stream, before making a sharp turn west after a few miles. At that point, the stream was hidden deep in the forest. I'd continue walking north, following the stream through the forest until I reached the river. Then I'd follow the river west to get to the lake. It's easy to get lost in this forest because the terrain isn't a simple slope down to the water. It goes up and down and you end up completely surrounded by trees. I've spent many days wandering around there alone or with my dad over the span of 18 years, never seeing anybody else in the forest. That summer I went there twice, both times mostly alone. The first time I left in the morning. I walked along the path away from the stream until the sharp bend, then cut back into the forest. After about an hour, I reached the stream. As I ran my hands through the water, I heard a bell ringing from far away, coming from the north. Something was ringing a bell fervently and periodically, which I found strange. I listened closely, wondering if it was just a lost hunting dog. I started moving toward the sound. Yeah, I probably would be the first person to die in a situation like this, but I was already heading north, so what the hell? I quickly realized it couldn't have been an animal. The bell sounded way too heavy for a typical collar, and the ringing was incredibly clear. As I moved, the bell seemed to be moving away from me. After about 5 minutes, the sound stopped completely. The stream wasn't big or strong enough to carry anything enclosed in a tin or similar container, and the river was still too far away. I thought of every possible explanation, but nothing fit, except for one obvious thing which I just didn't feel comfortable accepting. I knew it had to be a person. I stopped thinking about it and just kept walking normally, until I found a badger. A dead one, carefully decapitated. It was obviously done with a knife. The body was still fairly fresh, still limp with only a slight smell. The wound was full of maggots, but I knew they appeared quickly after exposure. The bell's sound had been following the stream, so that badger had been put there, maybe even killed right there. At least it was decapitated while I was walking that way. I don't really know. Nothing else happened that day. 1 week later, I went back for the second and last time that summer. I left home around 6 p.m. I made it to the stream, then walked to the river in about an hour. It was getting late and raining heavily, so I decided to head back the way I came. The sun set around 9 p.m. I was walking as fast as I could. The sound of the rain hitting the trees was surreal and loud. For a while, I was trotting with my head down through the clearest and most open part of the forest when I suddenly bumped into something heavy. The smell hit me immediately. It was sickly and rotten. It was the decomposing body of the badger, its head tied to its front paws. The way it was strung up from the tree made the whole scene look like a grotesque ham, swinging like a load of damp, disgusting mess. The putrid stench mixed with wet, dripping green liquid filled the air. I started gagging. Some kind of mucus-textured fluid had splattered into my hair. It was absolutely repulsive. At first, I just stood there, stunned and slightly gobsmacked. Then panic took over. I started fidgeting violently, feeling like I was drenched in that sickening juice. Even though I was already soaking wet from the rain, my senses became confused. It felt like a bucket of ice-cold water had been thrown over me. That's when it hit me. I had walked the same path to get to the river earlier. Someone had strung up the badger's body after I had passed it on my way there. Someone knew I had seen it. Was someone watching me? Running around the forest? Were the faint sounds of breaking branches around me not just animals? I looked around nervously and started jogging. Half running, half walking, I moved away from the stream, back toward the path. Then I heard the bell again. I immediately called my dad while running. I told him to meet me at the sharp westward turn on the path, the closest point to where I was. I told him to come as fast as he could because someone was in the forest. I can't explain the feeling that washed over me. It was like my insides dropped out. I literally felt the hairs rise on my neck even though I was soaked through. It was dark. I jogged as fast as I could. Panic was rising in my chest because the path was still too far away, just far enough that I didn't feel safe. It was still raining. Every single sound was muffled by the downpour. I felt like everything around me was getting further and further away. The bell was ringing again, longer than before, on and off, almost rhythmically. At one point, I swear it sounded like it was surrounding me. Fear had fully taken over. My hearing was shot and I couldn't breathe properly. I was starting to lose my sense of direction. I was moving automatically, heading southwest. But I had no real idea of what I was doing. My breath came out in ragged bursts. I sounded like a horse, coughing my lungs up, half crying like a toddler. I kept tripping over leaves and twigs like a complete idiot. I stayed on the phone with my mom. She and my dad were already on their way. I kept hearing strange sounds, but I couldn't tell what they were. My mom was yelling into the phone. She said they were already on the path I needed to reach. My dad had gotten out of the car and was heading east from the path bend. I was terrified. Instinct kicked in and I went into survival mode. I couldn't run anymore. I was doing that awkward half-running, half-speed walking thing because I was so out of breath. Then I heard it, branches breaking. Clear footsteps coming from deep in the forest. And the bell, it was louder now. I didn't want to look. I really didn't. But I did. I glanced over my shoulder. That's when I saw him. A tall figure was creeping through the trees, right at the edge of the clearing. He was holding a bell, slowly swinging it in front of his stomach. He was staring straight at me. I don't know if I had some hidden, superhuman sprinting ability, or if it was just raw adrenaline, but when I say I ran for my life, I mean I ran. I didn't look back. Not even once. I screamed with everything I had left in me. I lied, I wasn't on the phone with the police. But I screamed that I was. They're on the path. Dad, I can see you. I was there still running, but it felt like I wasn't. I wanted to scream, Dad, please, where are you? But I didn't. I kept it to myself. Something deep inside me was screaming that something awful was about to happen. I felt like the man was right behind me. I kept repeating to myself, don't look back, don't look back. My lungs were burning. I was gasping, wheezing, crying so hard I could barely see. I was screaming for my dad, voice cracking from panic. Then suddenly, I felt shivers crawl up the back of my neck. And something in me just switched off. I stopped thinking. I just ran. At some point, I dropped my bag without even noticing. I didn't realize it was gone until I was already in the car. In that moment, it felt like my phone was the only thing connecting me to safety, to home. Nothing around me felt real anymore. My legs were moving, but it didn't feel like me moving them. I didn't know if the man was still following. I was too afraid to look. All I could hear was my heart pounding in my ears. And the bell. Always the bell. Then finally I heard it. My dad. Shouting my name. I knew he could see me. I could hear it in his voice. Something sharp, urgent, protective. When we reached each other, I practically lunged into his arms. He held me so tightly, like he thought I'd disappear if he let go. He heard the bell too. My mom could hear it over the phone. She was already waiting with the car, engine running, ready to tear out of there. We didn't wait. We got the hell out. I never went back, and I never will.